Welcome back to the K Craftsman YouTube channel. Before we get into this week's build, I know last Monday we didn't release a video, and this Monday we didn't release one, but it still came out this week, so it still counts. But life has just been busy, and we're trying to get back onto that schedule. But I hope you enjoy this week's video. We announced the winner of the TikTok 1,000 follower giveaway on TikTok, so if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out, and we'll be doing more giveaways in the future, so just stay tuned for that. They'll be announced on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, pretty much all of our platforms when we do them. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this project. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do in this project is make the X pieces, and let me just show you how I figured out the angles and the cuts and everything we need to do. Okay, so to figure out the cuts and everything for the X pieces in this project, and the angles and the half lap joint and all that, the easiest way I find to do stuff like that is just to draw a full scale version of it, and then template your pieces to that. So as you can see here, that's kind of what I did, and then just basically marked everything from that and cut everything to that, and it's the easiest way to do it. So if you're interested in how I made this miter saw extension with the stop block, check out last week's video. I'll have a link in the description below and also a link here you can click on to. It was a fun build to make. It adds a little more control over cutting pieces on the miter saw. I work in a small shop, so I don't have a dedicated miter station with 2 tables on each end with a nice stop block setup. So this works well. I can tear it down. This comes off one piece, put it in a corner. It's good to go whenever, and screw it back on when I need it. And while we have this set up here, we're going to just go ahead and cut up the little tiny feet that are on the bottom, the pieces that we'll need to make that, but we'll come back to that later in the video. Again, if you haven't seen the video of how I built that thing for the miter station, go check that out, and you see here how easy it is just to tear down and put away. So it comes apart just like that, 2 screws, dust it off, and pack it away. So in order to find out the half lap joint, what you are going to want to do on each side of the piece where you have a long point and a short point, you want to mark and square over the center line. So I have it marked here and on the opposite side. So this piece, long to short, is 14 1/8. So half of that is 7 1/16. And we're going to take 2 of these pieces and square it over, and you need 2 of them. And I'll show you why. Okay, so now that you have both of the lines squared over, you want to lay one piece going one way and the other piece over top of the other one going the opposite way. And now you want to connect both of those lines. Let me show you closer here. So I've taken the pieces, I've laid them in an X form like they're going to be, and I've lined up those middle lines on this side and these middle lines on this side. So having done that, we can now take and mark onto this piece where we need the half lap joint to go and in what direction. We can flip it over and do the same with this piece. So now we have marked here where our half lap needs to go and at what angle that needs to be. So now we're going to set up the dado stack on our table saw, and and set up a system to be able to cut all of these. Alright, so you can hear the compressor in the background. We've dry fit all of them. They fit together pretty darn well. Now time to assemble them. So what I'm going to do, take them apart, glue it, put a couple 23 gauge pin nails in it just to hold it so I don't really need to clamp it. Besides, these hold themselves together pretty tight, so I think it'll be alright. So let's get to assembling. So I thought I recorded myself cutting these all up, but I didn't. Walk over to the camera. The camera's off. So, but it's just cutting some wood, but I did again use that nice little thing for the miter saw, so if you haven't seen that video, check it out. But I got these all cut down. It's just some 2x6s that I rough cut. So there are three. There's the top, there's a middle shelf, and there's the bottom. They're all 15 inch by 15 inch squares. So I'm going to do 3 glue ups, 30 plus inches, so we have some room to spare. And then I'm going to cut down 2 shelves out of each glue up after we've glued up those panels. Right now I'm going to join an edge of this stuff and then rip it to a even 5 inches. 15 inches divided by 5 is 3, so there will be 3 boards. And then, yeah, we'll move on to the glue up. So let's get to joining. Alright, so we've got one edge jointed on every piece. Now time to rip everything down to the final width of 5 inches. Alright, so with all those ripped down, I'm going to kind of look at everything, see how the grain is going to match up, and pick all the best faces, and then we will get to gluing. So I'm not super concerned with the grain, but I want it to look decent. So I've got all these boards down here with really tight grain structures, and these have wider ones. So I think we'll go with that. There's obviously a bunch of knots and stuff in this. The customer wants that look of this pine, so that's what we'll give them with these knots and stuff. Kind of a more rustic look is what they're wanting. So generally on my glue ups I would use biscuits to keep things aligned, but this is a pretty short glue up and I'm going to be cutting them in half, and so I don't want to put any biscuits in and take the risk of cutting through a slot and seeing that exposed biscuit. So we're just going to glue these up like they are with no alignment. Everything is these boards are pretty flat as is, so I think we'll be able to do it. Hopefully we can glue up all of them, but I don't know if I have enough clamps for that. So I have these oak blocks here because these clamps don't have any rubber ends on them, so they'll most definitely dent this pine if I don't use any protection. So that's what these oak strips are for. Distribute the clamping pressure from that tiny little square into a larger piece so it doesn't dent the board. So while we're waiting for the glue to dry on those, we're going to go ahead and make the feet for each of these tables. They're just going to be 4 little blocks that you'll see on the bottom side of the table that go directly under each part of the X, and they have these adjustable feet inside of them. It's just a pad with a threaded bolt and an insert that it threads onto. Now with these, I like to have it to where these can recess in here as short as possible. I could just drill the hole out for this, but then this pad would stick out above the foot like this. I don't really like the look of that. I like these to come in as, that way if the floor is a little uneven, it can be corrected, but you won't necessarily see these big adjustable feet on the bottom. So I've started off by just marking the centers of each of these pieces. And now I'm going to drill out a 1-inch hole with a Forstner bit, the depth of this plastic pad piece, and then we'll come back and drill a hole for the threaded insert deep enough so that bolt can recess all the way in. Alright, so we've got our holes drilled out with the hole in the center. Now it's just as simple as taking these, sliding them in, hammer them home, and screw it on. And here you can see that goes flush with the outside here, so you know, if you need to unscrew this a little bit, it'll just be a hair there and you'll barely be able to tell it's off the ground, versus having it stick out this much if we didn't countersink these in here. If you're wondering what these are felt base stem glides by Everbuilt, 1-inch. It's obviously not a sponsor, I'm just clarifying that, but I've used these on quite a few projects and they work well. And boom, 8 adjustable feet just like that in no time. So our panels are glued up. We're going to rough sand all of them and get them cut to their final dimension. So this is the basic shape, as you can see. Now the next step is to add a runner on the top of each of the small X's, And the way we're going to do that is to run these X's through the table saw, cutting a 1/2 inch off of here. Then we're going to mill down some 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch material to fill that back in, but this time it'll span the whole piece, so it'll basically be a piece that can span the X, that'll match the angles and everything, just so that we will have a place to mount to. It'll just make the assembly process easier, so let's do that. So I'm going to get the angle set right with this scrap piece first, and I'll come back and figure out our length. Alright, so here you can kind of see what this is going to do. It'll complete the X like this, and it'll give us a surface here to put attachment points for the shelves. And it also now is the same height as it was before, so we're just adding that 1/2 inch back on. I've got my stop block set, so yeah, let's just cut out the rest of them. So we just painted all of the pieces that need to be painted black, and I just spray painted those. It's not big enough to get the actual sprayer and buy a quart of paint, so I just use spray cans. It's quicker and easier. And now we're just going to stain all the shelves, and yeah, so I use a pre-stain conditioner on this pine. It just helps the stain lay more even, and then I think this is a dark walnut stain, so let's get the stain. Okay, so we've got all the shelves stained. Now it's time to put a clear coat on them. The first thing I like to do is I brush on sanding sealer on all of the show faces, and then we'll do a very light sanding just to scuff it up, and then we'll spray polyacrylic onto these. I use that instead of like hard wax oil like the Rubio Monocoat I use in my last bench project. If you haven't seen that, the video is linked here. In that video I explain why I prefer using those hard wax oils more than something like this that I have to spray. There's a lot of steps involved. But in this project, in this particular case, since I'm dealing with stained wood, it's best, in my opinion, just to go ahead and go through that polyacrylic spraying process in combination with the first coat of sanding sealer. So yeah, let's get started. So I just brush on the sanding sealer just because I don't want to get the spray gun out, spray it, then have to clean the spray gun and then go through all that. It's easy just to brush it on as long as you take your time and do it right. And then once you hit it with the sandpaper, as long as there's no brush strokes or runs in it, it'll be good to go. So let's get started. So we've got the sanding sealer put on, lightly sanded. And when you're working with stain projects, you really want to be careful when sanding the sanding sealer, because you don't want to sand off the stain. So you have to be very, very careful with doing that. But now we're just going to bring it all outside. It's a beautiful day, and spray it with the spray gun. I'll be spraying on a polyacrylic finish, and we'll probably do about 2 coats of that and be good to go. Alright, so we've brought them in here to dry. They're all sprayed with the first coat. Once they're dry, we're going to do a second coat and then wait for the final drying process and then assemble everything. It's a nifty little thing. It looks good like that. Now I can already see and hear the comments. What? You're using screws and pine for furniture? How dare you use available materials and methods that are proven to be decent if you do it correctly? I know, it's crazy. No, but for real though, I mean, I understand people's gripe with using pine and using screws. But again, if you do it correctly and use the screws to the best of their ability, it's going to be fine. I mean, that's not going anywhere. That's not breaking anytime soon. And this project isn't a fine furniture project. It's not marketed as one. It's not branded as one. This is a mid-level custom piece. Okay? So if you yourself are a beginner woodworker and you're using pine and materials like this, more power to you. It's about building things and making people happy. Customers happy with this, that's all that matters, which she is. I made 2 other pieces just like this. Haven't had any issues with it. I built pieces like this for myself in the past. I have one that is a few years old, assembled the same way, and still strong as ever. So to woodworkers out there who feel inferior for using quote-unquote inferior materials, just to you. Don't worry about what other people say. So let's keep going. Concludes this build. If you've liked this video, if you got something out of this video, please make sure to leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Any questions you have, leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer them. And again, just to conclude, you don't have to use super expensive materials and complicated joinery to produce furniture that looks good and is durable, as long as you take your time to make the piece well and make it right. it's perfectly okay. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week with another video.